My 6-year-old son, Samuel, had just torn a corner of the wrapping paper when my father reached over, pulled the gift from his hands, and said, "These are for real grandchildren." Samuel is adopted. I didn't say a word. I took my son's hand, we walked out of Christmas dinner, and I drove away. What happened in the next 72 hours didn't just ruin a holiday. It dismantled my entire family. I am his mother, and for 6 years, I had been quietly stitching our little family into the fabric of theirs, ignoring the threads that kept pulling loose. But when you hear those words, real grandchildren, spoken to a child who calls you mom, every prior compromise, every swallowed comment, instantly rearranges itself into a single, urgent question. What do you do when the people who are supposed to love your child unconditionally draw a line that excludes him? And what happens when you finally decide to protect him, even if it means watching everything else break? The truth is, the thread didn't snap at Christmas. It had been fraying since the day we brought Samuel home. He was 3 years old, with eyes that held too much quiet for a toddler, and a laugh that felt like a gift we had to earn. My husband, David, and I had navigated the labyrinth of adoption, the home studies, the waiting, the profound fear that we wouldn't be enough. What we hadn't prepared for was my parents' quiet resistance. There were no dramatic pronouncements, just a series of small, almost deniable choices that built a wall between their idea of family and ours. When we first introduced him, my mother's hug was careful, like Samuel was a delicate object she might break. My father patted his head and said, "Well, you're a brave little guy, aren't you?" It sounded kind, but I heard the unspoken qualifier: brave for being here, brave for being ours. The photo albums from my childhood, filled with pictures of me on my grandfather's lap, never got an update with Samuel's face. When my sister had her first biological child a year later, the announcement came framed. For Samuel, it had been a text message. I told myself they were adjusting, that it took time. But time just made the blueprint clearer. At family gatherings, my niece Chloe was swept into laps, fed treats from my mother's hand, her every babble celebrated as genius. Samuel would stand at the edge of the circle, holding my leg. If he ventured forward, the conversation would politely include him, but the warmth had a different temperature. It was courtesy, not connection. My father called Chloe my little princess. Samuel was always just Samuel. No possessive pronoun. No term of endearment that claimed him. The gifts were the most tangible ledger. For Chloe's 4th birthday, a custom-made dollhouse, a miniature replica of my parents' own home. For Samuel's 4th, a generic toy truck, still in its Amazon packaging. The receipt was tucked inside. When I mentioned it to my mother, her smile was placid. "Oh, we just want to make sure he likes it. You can exchange it if not." The message was coded, but I cracked it. Investments are made for permanence. For conditional members, you keep the option to return. David saw it too. We'd lie awake at night, his hand on mine in the dark. "Do we say something?" he'd whisper. "Or do we just make our own world for him?" I always chose silence. I was the peacekeeper, the one who believed if I just loved them enough, their hearts would expand. I worked so hard to create proof. I framed pictures of Samuel with his grandparents and mailed them. I coached him to call them Grandma and Grandpa with bright enthusiasm. I organized joint outings, where my father would watch Samuel on the playground with the detached interest of a birdwatcher, not the engulfing pride he showed watching Chloe. The summer before the Christmas incident, the dam of pretense developed a visible crack. We were at my parents' lake house. Samuel, then 5, was trying to show my father a frog he'd caught, his small hands cupped gently. "Look, Grandpa," my father, without looking up from his newspaper, said. "That's nice, kid. Go show your dad." Samuel's face fell. He didn't cry. He just walked slowly to the water's edge and let the frog go. I watched him stare at the ripples, his little shoulders slumped. That was the first time I felt the peacekeeper in me start to fracture. The cost of the peace was being paid for my son's sense of worth. A month later, my sister let something slip. We were having coffee, and she was complaining about our parents being overly involved with Chloe. "They just don't get boundaries," she sighed. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Mom said it's different with Samuel. She said, with Chloe, it's in my bones. With him, it's a choice I have to make every time." She immediately looked guilty. "I shouldn't have said that. You know she loves him." But that was it, wasn't it? The unvarnished truth. For his biological granddaughter, love was an instinct, a cellular imperative. For my son, it was a conscious charity, a moral effort. That sentence became the key that unlocked every prior slight, every chilled hug, every discounted gift. I stopped trying to prove we belonged. A cold, clear space opened up inside me. I began to pull back, building softer, warmer traditions in our own home. My parents noticed the distance. Instead of curiosity, there was annoyance. The invitations became more insistent, laced with guilt. "You're keeping him from us," my mother said once. Which is why, when the Christmas invitation arrived, I hesitated. David said we shouldn't go. But a stubborn, maybe foolish, part of me thought the magic of the holiday might finally be the bridge. That the sight of Samuel in his little reindeer sweater, his belief in the season's goodness, would melt the last of the resistance. I packed the car with presents, including the carefully chosen, expensive leather gloves for my father. I rehearsed smiles in the mirror. The evening started tense but civil. Samuel was shy, clinging to me. My father made a show of handing Chloe her stack of gifts, wrapped in glittering paper with elaborate bows. Samuel's single present from them was under the tree, wrapped in plain red. I kept my hand on Samuel's back, a steady anchor. Then, when the chaos of unwrapping began, my father handed Samuel a small, lumpy package. Samuel's eyes lit up. He started tearing at the paper. And that's when my father leaned in, his voice low but clear in a sudden lull, and took it back. "These are for real grandchildren." The room didn't gasp, it just froze. My sister looked at her hands. My mother's mouth became a thin line. In that absolute silence, the architecture of my life, the excuses, the hope, the desperate belief in eventual acceptance, collapsed into rubble. I looked at my son's confused, crumbling face, then at my father's defiant, unchanged one. And I knew every single thing I was about to lose. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears and Samuel's soft, confused sniffles from the backseat. He didn't ask why we left. He didn't ask what real grandchildren meant. At 6, he already understood the grammar of rejection. He just stared out the window at the passing Christmas lights, their cheer now a cruel joke. David was waiting at the door, his smile dissolving as he saw our faces. I didn't have to explain. He just knelt, wrapped Samuel in a hug so tight it seemed to hold his pieces together, and whispered, "You are my real, whole, perfect son." That night, we broke our own rule and let Samuel sleep in our bed. He curled between us, his breathing eventually evening out into sleep, while David and I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The question hung there with us. What now? The first phone call came at 8 a.m. on December 26th. My sister. Her voice was clipped, anxious. "You can't just leave like that. You made everything so awkward. Mom was crying after you left." I felt a cold clarity wash over me, not concern for Samuel, not outrage at our father, awkwardness. "What did you expect me to do, Lauren?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Agree with him, laugh it off." There was a pause. "He didn't mean it like that," she said, but the defense was weak, automatic. "He was just frustrated. The gifts were expensive. He didn't want them wasted." And there it was, the translation. In their lexicon, my son was a potential waste of resources. I ended the call. The peacekeeper was dead. A protector had taken her place. By noon, my mother called. This time, the tone was wounded, performatively so. "How could you take him and run off on Christmas? You ruined the day for everyone. Your father is heartbroken." I let her speak. When she finished, I asked one question. "Are you calling to apologize to Samuel?" The silence was profound. "Apologize," she echoed, as if I'd suggested she sprout wings. "For what? For a misunderstanding." That was the second crack in the foundation. Not only did they see no wrong, they cast themselves as the victims of my sensitivity. I realized then we weren't having a conflict. We were speaking two different, mutually exclusive languages. In theirs, offense was taken, not given. In mine, a child's heart had been publicly quantified and found lacking. I made the first deliberate decision of the new war. I would not initiate contact. I would not explain, justify, or seek repair. My energy would be spent on one thing, insulating my son from the shrapnel. I unplugged the landline. I silenced notifications from my family. I watched Samuel closely. He was quieter, more clingy. He started drawing pictures of our family of 3 inside a big heart, with other stick figure people floating outside the line. He didn't draw his grandparents at all. The therapist we'd wisely engaged months earlier, Dr. Rosen, had an emergency session with us. "What he's internalizing," she said gently, "is the concept of conditional belonging. that his place in the family is a guest pass, not a birthright, and at his age, he blames himself. David's hand gripped mine so hard it hurt. The battle was no longer about hurt feelings. It was for Samuel's fundamental sense of safety in the world. On the evening of the 27th, the siege escalated. My father showed up at our house. Not calling, not texting. Just his car in the driveway, his firm knock on the door. David answered. I stood behind him in the hallway, my body thrumming with a primal alertness. My father didn't ask to come in. He stood on the porch, his breath making clouds in the cold air, and delivered an ultimatum. This nonsense ends now. You will bring that boy over tomorrow for a proper Christmas. You will apologize for your dramatics, and we will move on. He said that boy, like Samuel, was a stray pet I'd brought home. David, who is usually the calm one, took a step forward. His voice was low, steel wrapped in velvet. His name is Samuel. He is your grandson, and you will not speak about him or to us until you can start with an apology to him. My father's face flushed. He looked past David directly at me. You've turned him against me too, he accused. In that moment, I saw the core of the rot. It was never just about adoption. It was about control. I had defied the family script by adopting outside the bloodline. I had compounded the sin by choosing my son's well-being over his authority. My rebellion was complete. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and closed the door. I watched through the window as he stood there for a full minute, stunned, before driving away. The line was drawn, and we were on the side we had built ourselves. The following morning, the digital warfare began. A flood of texts from extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins. The narrative had been crafted and distributed. I was volatile, unforgiving. I had stolen Christmas from an aging grandfather over a simple slip of the tongue. I was keeping a child from his family. The messages were a mix of guilt, pressure, and manufactured concern. Family forgives. Don't let pride destroy your roots. Think of your poor mother. It was a coordinated campaign to isolate me and force a surrender. But with each message, my resolve petrified. I began to screenshot them. I created a folder, my digital evidence file. I didn't reply to a single one. Then the pivot. A message from my cousin Amy. We weren't particularly close, but her words were different. Hey, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Can I call you? When we spoke, her voice was shaky. I believe you, she said first. And I need to tell you something. It's about your dad and my brother, Jason. Jason was also adopted, the only other adopted cousin in our generation. Amy proceeded to unravel a hidden history. When Jason was a teenager, he'd had a massive fight with my father over college choices. And in the heat of it, my father had yelled, "You don't get to make demands, you're lucky to even be here." The story had been buried. Jason, shamed into silence, told he was too sensitive. My father had never apologized. I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. This wasn't a slip. It was a pattern, a pathology. My son wasn't the first target. He was the latest in a line of children deemed perpetually grateful, perpetually less than. Armed with this, I did something I'd never done before. I reached out to Jason, now a quiet, kind man in his 30s. We met for coffee. He confirmed everything, his eyes holding a familiar old hurt. "It never goes away," he said softly. "That feeling of being a guest in your own family. I spent years trying to earn what was freely given to others." He'd eventually created distance for his own mental health. "Protect Samuel," he urged me. "What they're doing. It writes itself on a kid's soul." His words were a terrible gift. They absolved me of any remaining doubt. This was bigger than one Christmas. This was a systemic poison. I returned home, a new plan crystallizing. I would not just withdraw, I would formally, irrevocably sever the connection. I sat down at my computer. I began to draft an email, not an emotional plea, but a statement of fact. I listed the incidents, from the careful hugs to the receipt in the toy, culminating in the Christmas pronouncement. I included my father's porch ultimatum. I did not accuse. I simply stated what happened and the conclusion I had drawn, that they did not, and perhaps could not, see Samuel as a full member of the family. Therefore, to protect him, we would be removing ourselves from all family events and communications indefinitely. The decision was not up for debate. I read it aloud to David. He nodded, his face grim. "Send it." I hit send at 9 p.m. on December 28th. The 72 hours were up. The dismantling was complete on our end, but I had underestimated the fallout. The response was not silence. It was an explosion. My inbox became a battlefield. The first response was from my father, a terse, 3-line reply that bypassed every point I'd made. "Consider your position in this family forfeit. Do not contact us again. You have chosen your path." It was a disowning, not an emotional rupture, but a cold, administrative severance. My mother's email followed minutes later, longer, dripping with wounded piety. She accused me of weaponizing my son, of seeking to destroy the family with modern sensitivities, and of being influenced by my husband, who never understood our close-knit dynamic. The subtext was clear. The problem wasn't their actions. It was my refusal to continue accepting them. But the true shock came from my sister, Lauren. Her email was the longest and the most devastating. She systematically dismantled my examples. The dollhouse for Chloe. A family heirloom piece, it's different. The receipt in Samuel's gift. A thoughtful gesture to ensure he got what he wanted. The Christmas incident. A joke taken out of context by a hypersensitive child. Then she landed the blow I never saw coming. Maybe if you hadn't been so desperate to force a bond, Samuel would feel more secure. Your anxiety is what's making him feel different. You've projected your own insecurities about adopting onto all of us, and now you're making him pay the price. I read it twice, my hands trembling. She wasn't just siding with them. She was reframing me as the source of the poison, the unstable element corrupting the family. My own sister had become their chief strategist. The next wave was financial. 3 days later, a formal letter arrived from a law firm representing my father. It was regarding the family trust. My grandfather had set up a modest educational trust for grandchildren. The letter stated that, per the trust's definition of grandchild as a biological descendant, Samuel was not a beneficiary. They were informing me to avoid future misunderstanding. This wasn't about the money, which was a small college fund. It was about using legal parchment to etch their distinction into permanence. They had lawyered up to officially declare my son an outsider. David held the letter, his face pale with rage. "They're building a paper trail to exclude him," he said. "This is premeditated." We consulted our own attorney, a sharp woman named Alina who specialized in family law. She reviewed the trust documents and my emails. "What they're doing is morally abhorrent," she said. "But legally, on the trust, they're likely within their rights unless you can prove the amendment was made with discriminatory intent after his adoption. The more immediate issue is the harassment. The emails, the porch confrontation. This is building a case for a restraining order if it escalates further." The word restraining order hit me like a physical blow. The path we were on led to courtrooms and police reports. My family had become a legal adversary. The social siege intensified. My parents, with Lauren's help, began a quiet campaign to turn the extended family and even family friends against us. Whispers became conversations. We were ungrateful. We had abandoned my parents. I was using my adopted child as a pawn in a personal war. Invitations to weddings, birthdays, even casual barbecues dried up. My phone, which I'd turned back on, stayed silent except for the occasional text from a cousin saying, "I'm praying for your family to heal," which was just spiritualized pressure. The isolation was complete. But in the silence, a strange thing happened. My resolve hardened into something unbreakable. The cost of belonging had been my son's dignity. The price of exile was merely our presence at shallow gatherings. It was no contest. Then the wait it gets worse moment. A package arrived, not from my parents, but from my aunt, my mother's sister, whom I'd always considered neutral. Inside was a note and a stack of old photographs. The note read, "I found these cleaning out my attic. I thought you should have them. I'm sorry." The photos were from my childhood, ones I'd never seen. Pictures of my mother, pregnant with me, beaming, ultrasound images framed. And then, tucked behind them, a newer document, a printed email chain from over 7 years ago, around the time we started the adoption process. It was between my mother and my aunt. My mother had written, "I just don't know if I can love a child that isn't of our blood. It feels like welcoming a stranger and calling him heir. Lauren's children will be different. They'll carry us forward. This feels like a detour." I sat on the floor of my living room, the photographic proof of her joyous biological anticipation in one hand, the cold digital proof of her conditional acceptance in the other. The contrast was so stark it was almost artistic. This wasn't a recent development born of Christmas stress. This was the foundational bedrock of her feelings. expressed in private long before Samuel had a name or a face. The casual cruelty of a detour to describe my son's entire place in our family lineage took my breath away. My aunt had sent this as an act of secret rebellion, a grenade tossed into my lap. It was the ultimate confirmation. There would be no awakening, no grand change of heart. The bias was codified in her deepest beliefs. I shared it with David and then with Dr. Rosen. The therapist's demeanor was grave. "This is the key he'll need later," she said. "Not now, but when he's older and asks questions. This isn't about him. This is about them. This document proves the deficit was in their capacity to love, not in his worthiness to be loved." We locked it away in a safe. It was both a weapon and a shield. The final escalation was the most grotesque. A week later, through a convoluted chain of mutual friends, we learned that my father had revised his will. The new version, we were told, explicitly divided his estate between my sister and her biological descendants, with a clause stating that any child, not meeting the definition of natural-born lineage, was excluded. They had moved from Christmas gifts to trust funds to the final disposition of their entire legacy. They were writing Samuel out of their history and their future, in perpetuity. It was a symbolic erasure so complete it felt violent. That night I made a decision. The private war was over. They had chosen the nuclear option of total disinheritance, both emotional and financial. By doing so, they had freed me from any last lingering obligation to protect their reputation. If they were so confident in their position, let them own it fully. I would not hide the truth to spare them shame. I opened a new document. But this time, I wasn't writing an email to family. I was drafting something else entirely. The battle for my family was lost. A new one was about to begin. The document I began that night was not an email or a legal threat. It was a story. I wrote down everything, from the first careful hug to the lawyer's letter, in clear, unflinching prose. I wrote it for Samuel, so that one day, if he ever wondered what happened, he would have a record that centered his truth, not their narrative. But then I realized he wasn't the only one who needed it. I had a small blog, a quiet corner of the internet where I wrote about parenting and adoption. With David's unwavering support, I hit publish. I titled it, "What We Lost When We Chose Our Son." I did not name my family. I did not post pictures. I simply told the story of the 72 hours that dismantled a family and the years of silent cuts that led there. I expected a few comments from close friends. What happened next was a quiet earthquake. The post was shared, then shared again. Emails and messages poured in from other adoptive parents, from adoptees now in their 40s and 50s still carrying the scar of conditional love, from grandparents who wrote to say, "We made mistakes, but we learned. Thank you for the wake-up call." The validation was a balm, but it was also a mirror. We were not a rare, broken anomaly. We were one story in a vast, silent epidemic of family rejection. My family's response to the post was the final, predictable twist. My father sent one last email. "You have humiliated us publicly. You are dead to us." My mother and sister blocked me on every platform. The extended family, now confronted with a version of events they couldn't easily dismiss as my sensitivity, split. A few cousins quietly messaged their support. Others vanished, choosing the easier path of neutrality, which in practice meant siding with the louder, more established power. The dismantling was now public, permanent, and complete. In the space that opened up, we began to rebuild. We invested entirely in our chosen family, friends who showed up, David's wonderfully accepting parents, a community of adoptive families we connected with through the blog. We created new traditions. Christmas morning became a joyful, chaotic affair in our own living room, filled with paper crowns and pancake breakfasts and the absolute certainty of belonging. Samuel, in the safe container of our unconditional love, began to bloom again. In therapy, he worked through the confusion. One day, he told Dr. Rosen, "My old grandma and grandpa had a broken way to love. My heart lives here now." He had articulated the entire conflict with the clarity of a child. Years passed. The sharp pain dulled to a permanent, low-grade ache, like the ghost of a limb. We heard through the grapevine that my parents doted on Chloe, my sister's daughter, now the sole receptacle of their legacy. We heard my father had a minor health scare. We did not reach out. The boundary was a fortress we maintained, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Protecting Samuel's peace was our highest law. Then last spring, the surprising detail. A letter arrived, handwritten on my mother's stationery. My first instinct was to burn it unopened. But curiosity, that old betrayer, won. It was not an apology, it was a summons. My father had been diagnosed with a serious, progressive illness. "He wants to see Samuel," she wrote. "One time before it's too late. He is your father. Samuel is his blood in the ways that matter." I read that line over and over. In the ways that matter. Even at the gates of mortality, the condition remained. He was not seeking to make amends. He was seeking absolution, a deathbed pardon for his own conscience, on his own terms. He wanted a photograph for the eulogy, proof of a grandfather's love that never existed. I discussed it with David, with Dr. Rosen, and in an age-appropriate way with Samuel, who was now 9. Samuel listened quietly and then asked, "Will he say sorry for taking my present?" I told him I didn't know. Samuel thought for a moment and said, "Then I don't want to go. I don't need to see him to know who I am." His words, so steady and sure, were the final payoff of every hard choice we'd made. He had internalized his worth. I wrote back to my mother a short note. "We wish you peace, but we cannot offer Samuel as a tool for reconciliation you have not earned. Our door is closed." That was the last communication. The story had reached its end. We did not get a dramatic reconciliation. We did not get vindication. We got something quieter and more durable. A small, sturdy family, bound by choice and fierce protection. The family of origin I lost was not the family I thought I had. It was a structure built on conditions I could never meet and my son could never fulfill. So, what happened in the 72 hours after that Christmas dinner? I learned that some lines, once crossed, reveal a chasm that cannot be bridged. I learned that silence can be a weapon, and walking away can be the strongest sentence you ever speak. And I learned that love is not a blood right, but a daily, active choice. We make it every day for our son. And in the space where their rejection lived, we built a home that needs no validation from anyone else. So what is the weight of a word like real? When my father used it, he meant a genetic chain, a biological certainty. But I have learned that real love doesn't need a blood test. It shows up. It protects. It chooses the vulnerable over the comfortable. The family we lost was preoccupied with a story of lineage. The family we built is writing a story of belonging. If you are watching this and you recognize these patterns, the conditional gifts, the careful distance, the language that separates ours from theirs, hear this. You are not protecting family peace by allowing a child to be treated as less than. You are enforcing a hierarchy that will crack their foundation. The cost of keeping the peace is always paid by the most vulnerable person in the room. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is cause a rupture. Sometimes, dismantling is the only way to build something true. This story is not just about adoption. It is about any love that is deemed secondary. The love for a stepchild, a partner your family doesn't approve of, a friend who becomes your bedrock. It is about the people who draw circles that exclude, and the courage it takes to draw a wider, kinder circle that includes. To my son, and to anyone who has been told they are not real family, your belonging is not up for debate. It is not a gift they can give or take. It is your right, inherent in your very existence in the hearts that choose you. Do not spend your life seeking a validation from people who operate from a scarcity of love. Your task is not to change their minds. Your task is to believe the people who show you, every day, that you are already home. Our family now is small, and it is whole. It is built on the rubble of what broke, and it is stronger for it. That walk to the car on Christmas Day felt like an ending. It was actually our beginning. Thank you for listening to our story. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more journeys into the difficult, beautiful work of building honest lives. Remember, the families that matter most are often the ones we choose.